Hello everyone, this is Yunus. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I will show you a hands-on exercise involving CodeBuild and CodeDeploy, two important tools in AWS DevOps. I'm not using CodePipeline for end-to-end automation, but I will do the manual setup and manual trigger for both CodeBuild and CodeDeploy. And the objective is that we can clearly understand how to set up these two tools. And we'll be using a simple index.jsp hello world program for this. I'll provide you with the code and I will provide you the document with step-by-step procedure to do this hands-on exercise. You can look for that in the video description. And I'll be doing another video later where I'll use CodePipeline for the end-to-end automation. Okay, let's start. Before we get into the hands-on exercise, let us look at the two tools CodeBuild and CodeDeploy at the very high level. So we know that the continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline is one of the very important, most important aspect of DevOps. And that's what is shown here. It shows the various stages of the SDLC lifecycle or the CI/CD pipeline. It has stages such as coding, you submit the code, then it is built into a package, then testing is done. Then if you have to deploy it into another environment, you have to provision that environment using tools such as CloudFormation, Terraform, etc. Then you deploy it and then you monitor it. In this hands-on exercise, I'm going to show you only CodeBuild and CodeDeploy. CodeBuild actually handles the build part, quite obvious, and it also can do some testing. Deploy actually automates the deployment of your application. A little bit more details about CodeBuild. It compiles the source code, it can run tests, and it produces the package. We already discussed that part. It is fully managed, so you don't need to worry about provisioning and managing your own build servers. And when auto-scaling is required, when you have to increase the capacity of your build servers, auto-scaling will be done by AWS itself. And you only pay by the minute of your actual use. That is also an important factor. Now let's look at CodeDeploy. CodeDeploy, obviously, it automates code deployments to EC2, ECS, Lambda, etc. It makes it easier for you to rapidly release new features. That is a very important aspect of DevOps. If you have to manually deploy your code to multiple servers, it is going to take time. But if you have an automation tool such as CodeDeploy, it makes it easier for you to rapidly release new features. And it helps you to avoid downtime during deployment, and it can manage roll-offs for you if required. For example, your automated installation fails for some reason, and maybe it can retry a couple of times, and if it still fails, it can actually do the roll-off from all the related application servers. That is another advantage. Okay, with that, let us start our hands-on exercise. Okay, we are going to start with CodeBuild. So if you have to use CodeBuild, of course, we need the code first. So we are going to take the code from this GitHub repository. I'll give you the link. You can either fork it to your GitHub account, or you can directly use it from my GitHub account. It's a simple web application, index.jsp. If you open, you can see that it's a simple web page, hello world from Yunus. You can make changes to this. Whatever message you want to change it to, you can do that, because finally this will show up as a web page with these messages. Okay, so we have the code ready. What we will do is we will open Cloud9. Again, some of these tools, Cloud9, I'm not going to show you how to open Cloud9, etc. You can figure it out. So I opened a Cloud9 environment, and what I'm going to do is I need to make some changes to the code which is already there in GitHub. So what I will do is I will clone this to my home directory in Cloud9. So let me copy paste that code. As I said earlier, I will include all these code in a cheat sheet and I will give you access to that. So I'm going to clone it here. So I have got all those files which are part of that repository. You can just do ls and you can see which are the files. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of each of those files. If you want to make modifications to that index.jsp, you go to src and then you can make modifications. One important thing which you need to have in this code package is buildspec.yaml. I have already created it. If it is not there, you have to create it. I will give you the contents anyway. Since it is already there, I'll just open it and show you what is the content. So you know that buildspec.yaml is the configuration file for CodeBuild. It will tell CodeBuild how to build this particular load, what are the commands to be executed, which version of Java to be installed, etc. So you can see Corretto 17. Amazon Corretto is AWS's own distribution of JDK, and pre-build, it just echoes some message, that is okay. And as part of build stage, you use the command maven install. So maven is the compilation tool or build tool which we are using here. And then the other important part is the artifacts, the output of your build process, where it will be stored and in what name. It will be stored in a folder called target, and this will be the name of that particular file, and we will store it in an S3. So that we will configure it in CodeBuild console, not as part of buildspec.yaml. Okay, so we have got all the files. What do we do next? We have to create a zip file which includes all these files inside this particular folder. So what do we do? From within this folder, from within yt hello world, I will issue this zip command. Okay, so it will create that zip file. You can see that zip file here, yt hello world.zip. So what do we do next? Now I have got all my code files compressed into this particular zip file. Now I will upload this into an S3 bucket and then use that as a source for my code build. I'll use the same S3 bucket as the output, or to store the output of the build process, I'll use the same S3 bucket. So we need to create an S3 bucket. Of course, if you have an S3 bucket already, you can use that. But here I'm going to create one. So let me issue that command. So here I'm creating this bucket called Yunus YT code build. You can give your own name and region US East 1. So let me issue this command. Yeah, it is created. Just to check if it is already created, you can just do AWS S3 ls. It will list this particular bucket name. Okay, what next? The next point is I will copy or I will upload this zip file into that S3 bucket. So let me issue the command for that. So you can see I'm copying this file yt hello world.zip to S3 and then the bucket name. Then this input is a folder which I'm going to create. If you issue the command like this, it will automatically create that folder called input. Okay, so I'm copying it. So it is copied. So you can go to S3 and check if it is already copied there. Go to S3 and refresh and go to your bucket here. You can see that inside input you have the zip file. Okay, so that is ready. So what we have done is we pulled the code from one of the GitHub repositories, added the buildspec.yaml file, zipped it and uploaded it into an S3 bucket. Now the next thing which we need to do is we have to go to CodeBuild and create the build project. So let me do that. Okay, so here is CodeBuild console. Now go to build project and create a build project. Okay, and the name you can give any name, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to just give CodeBuild demo, just giving a date, that's all. You can give your own name and come down, and it is asking which is the source provider. It is S3. Then it will ask which is the S3 bucket. So select that, and object key. Object key you can give the complete object key including input. I'm going to copy paste that. Source version optional, leave that. Environment image, managed image, leave that. Compute EC2, that is fine. Operating system, anything is okay. I'll choose Ubuntu. Runtime, take it as standard. And image, standard 7, the latest image. When you create a project, it will create the corresponding container images with the required containers running in that. So we are actually selecting the images for that. Image version, always use the latest image, that is okay. Come down, new service role. You can select new service role. If it is already there, it will give an error, then you change the name. I'm going to change the name because I think I had already created it earlier, that's why. So I change the name. This role is required because CodeBuild server needs some permissions to access some other services, and that will be given by this particular new service role. Come down, it says use build spec file. Yes, we are using build spec file. If you are using the build spec file name as buildspec.yaml, then that is a default name. You don't need to mention it here. Otherwise, if you are using any other name, you have to mention that name here. Batch configuration, artifacts. Where are you going to save your artifact? I'll save it in Amazon S3. And bucket name, I'll use the same bucket. And name of the file I am not specifying because I have already given that in buildspec.yaml, but path I will say output. That's it. You can leave everything else as default and create build project. It will take 30 seconds. Okay, it says, it gives an error saying CodeBuild base policy CodeBuild demo November 26 already exists. So what I will do is, I will change this to my name. This happens because you have already created the build project with the same name before. That's all. So the build project is created. Now what I can do is I can run the build. So for running the build, you can just click on start build. So the project is created. Let me list all the projects here. Yeah, there is one project. So select it. And what do we want to do? We want to start the build. Start now. So ideally what should happen is, if you go to your S3 bucket and go back here, refresh, you can see only input folder. After the build, what should happen is output folder should be created. Inside that there should be a folder called target, and inside that our hello world jar file should be present. Okay, so let me build the project. When the build process is in progress, come down and click on phase details. So you can see the request is submitted, then it is queued. Next thing is it has to provision the build server, because it has to create the containers. Based on whatever we have configured, whatever I have configured, it will create the containers, and then once the containers are ready, the job will be given to those containers. So provisioning is done. Now it will download the source, which is done, and then the other steps are actually happening. Pre-build is happening. Now build and post-build, and now after that other further stages are happening. You can see that build took 17 seconds, whereas most of the others took less than 1 second. Downloading took 6, provisioning took 17 seconds, etc. The timing is also given. So yeah, everything is done. So the build is ready. Let us go to the S3 bucket and see if it is ready. So if I refresh, one more folder should be there. Refresh. Yes, output is there. Go to output. Yeah, the project name first, and then target, and then the hello world var file. So we have completed code build successfully. Next, we have to see how do I deploy this var file onto an EC2 instance and then view the web page. Okay, now we are in the second stage of this hands-on exercise. Here we are going to deploy the package whatever we just created, which belongs to a simple web application, that we are going to deploy it into an EC2. So how do we go about that? First, let me create an EC2 instance onto which I will install this package. So go to EC2 dashboard and launch instance. Launch instance, you can give the name as CodeDeploy or whichever name, but this name is important. You need to remember that. Come down and you can use Ubuntu. Any of these you can use, but I'm using Ubuntu. Come down. T2 micro is okay. Key pair, you can select a key pair. Come down. For security group, you can use any security group which has port numbers 22 and 8080 must be open. So instead of creating it, I'm going to use something which is existing for me, but you will have to actually create one if you don't have. I'm using something which is already existing. Come down. In advanced details, one is very important, IAM instance profile. So you need to create a CodeDeploy EC2 service role. I will show you how to do that. I already created one, but I will show you that. So a role given to EC2 to use CodeDeploy. This is what I'm going to use, but this is important. Okay, without this, the CodeDeploy agent which we are going to install in this EC2, it will not work if you don't give this particular role. But how do you know which are the policies attached to this? I'll show you that. Role given to EC2 use CodeDeploy. I'll show you the policies attached, but before that I will just create this EC2. Everything else you can leave it as default. Launch instance, and then let me take you to IAM, and you can see these are the IAM roles which deals with CodeDeploy. So this is the role which I used, role given to EC2 to use CodeDeploy. I only created that. So let me go there and see what are the policies attached. Okay, I have attached 2 policies, one SSM full access, that is not really required. What is required is Amazon EC2 role for AWS CodeDeploy. So keep that in mind. So anyway, in my cheat sheet, all these points will be mentioned, and I'm not showing you how to create the role, etc., that you can figure out. Let me go back to EC2 and then see if the instance is working. Okay, you can see that the CodeDeploy instance is still initializing. That is okay. In the meantime, we need to do something else. Let me leave this EC2 here and I will go to Cloud9, and I need to prepare my package for deployment. So I have already created my artifact, the compiled artifact built package. It is already there in the S3 bucket. Along with that, I also need to include what is called appspec.yaml file. Appspec.yaml file is the configuration file for CodeDeploy. So we'll see how to do that. Right now we are inside this YT hello world. I will get out of that and create a new folder called my deploy package, and then what I will do is I will download that war file from S3 bucket. So let me do that. The project name, there is a change. Okay, I am downloading the war file here. Yes, it is downloaded. The next thing which I need to do is I need to create an appspec.yaml file. So let me use nano appspec.yaml, enter, and I'll copy paste the code. Okay, so here this is for operating system Linux files. These are the files which will be copied from the source to the destination as part of the installation. So that is exactly what is happening in the installation. From the source is whichever package you have given. From there, the war file will be copied into this /var/lib tomcat9 webapps folder of the EC2, so that the corresponding web page you will be able to view. And before install, you have to execute this particular shell script, and I will tell you what is there in that shell script. It actually installs Tomcat into this EC2 and activates it. That's it. I'll show you that. Control X. Yes. So we need to create that shell script called start tomcat.sh. So let me do that. Nano start tomcat.sh, and let me copy the file. It has just 2 lines. The first one installs Tomcat9 and second one enables Tomcat. That's all. So Control X, Y, enter. So you can see that there are 3 files. One is the war file, one is the shell script which installs and activates Tomcat, and the third one is the appspec.yaml file, which is the configuration file for CodeDeploy. So this is the deployment package. Now I need to zip it again, just like what we did for the code files earlier. So let me zip it. Zip -r deploy package star means it will take all the 3 files and it will create the deployment package. And we have to copy this deployment package back into the S3. So let me do that. Okay, that package is now copied into the S3 bucket. You can go to the S3 bucket and check. Now let us ensure that the EC2 is up and running, and we have to install CodeDeploy agent inside the EC2. So let me go there. You can see that it is up and running. So let me connect to that. Click on connect. So you have this connection string, copy that and open a terminal or command prompt. Go to your downloads folder and issue this connection string, and you will be inside the EC2. Now you have to install a few utilities here. So let me do that. Basically, I'm installing wget, unzip and AWS CLI. So I'm installing some basic utilities into this EC2. Okay, now the next step is we need to ensure that CodeDeploy agent is working in this. For that, I will create a small shell script. Okay, I have copied the shell script, installs Ruby, and then it downloads the CodeDeploy agent, and then we are installing it, and then we are checking the status of the CodeDeploy agent. So before we execute it, just change the permission for that particular file, give execute permission, and then execute it. Yeah, now the CodeDeploy agent is active and running. Now it is time for us to go to CodeDeploy service and create the deployment and the corresponding configurations. So go to CodeDeploy, go to applications. We need to create an application. Okay, so we are in CodeDeploy. Create an application as the first step. You can give any name. I'll just give CodeDeploy demo as the name. And I'm going to deploy it into an EC2. So let me choose EC2 or on-premises. Then select create application. So the application is created. Now I need to create a deployment group. What is deployment group? This application is running in which all EC2 instances. I have to define that. So a deployment group will be a set of EC2 instances with the same tag name onto which we will be installing this application. So let me create deployment group. Okay, this deployment group is being created for this application. Now deployment group name, I will just say my DEP group. You can give any name. Service role, you can select this CodeDeploy service role. Okay, now I'll show you what policy is attached with this particular role. If you already have such a role, you can use it, or you will have to create one. So I created, or I'm using this CodeDeploy service role. Let me show you what are the policies attached to that particular CodeDeploy service role. So here is that role. Open that and you can see AWS CodeDeploy role. This is the only policy which is attached with that particular role. So you will have to create that role if you don't have. Now let me go back to CodeDeploy. I have used this particular role. Come down. We are going to choose in place. We are going to do in place upgrade only. We will explain the difference between in place and blue green in another session, not now. Come down and I'm going to choose EC2 instances because I'm going to install this in EC2 instances. So how do I pick in which all EC2 instances this need to be installed? For that you can use the tag. I have given a tag name. The name I have given is CodeDeploy. This is the name I have given. I'm talking about this name. This is the name tag, right? So based on that, the deployment process will pick the EC2 instances which has the same name as CodeDeploy. Okay, come down. You can leave everything else as default. CodeDeploy, default, all at once, all these are fine. Enable load balancing, that is not required. Just remove it. Now click on create deployment group. Okay, so the deployment group is also created. The next thing what we need is create the deployment. So we created an application, gave a name and said that includes EC2 instances. Then I created a group of EC2 instances based on the name tag. Basically, in my case, I have only one EC2, but in a real life scenario, it will be multiple EC2s. Now I have to create deployment. Create deployment means we are actually deploying it. So let me click on create deployment. So this deployment belongs to this particular deployment group. Come down, my application is stored in S3. It is asking where is your code. So I'll have to give that. So what I will do is I will go to that S3 bucket and refresh. So I have this deploy package zip. Click on that and you will get the S3 URI here. Go back to CodeDeploy, just paste it here. Okay, so that is where your deployment package is there. Come down, deployment group overrides. This is okay by default. The default values are okay. Rollback configuration, let us leave it as default. Now click on create deployment. What should ideally happen is now the var file or whatever deployment package we had created, the deployment package has one shell script, one appspec.yaml file and one actual var file. So the CodeDeploy will use that shell script and the appspec.yaml file to deploy my var file into the EC2 which I have launched. And as a result, I will be able to view the web page by accessing the public DNS of that EC2. So let me deploy first, create deployment, and then come down here and go to your view events so that you can see if there are any errors, etc. There are multiple phases, lifecycle hooks as part of the deployment process. So it is going through each of them. Download bundle is done, before install, that is done. Now installation is done. Now after install, application start, validate service, everything is done because we did not have further activities in that. So basically now the deployment is done. So how do I test it? Installation is done. We should be able to access the corresponding web page. You can go to the EC2, get the IP address and open a new tab, paste the IP address and then 8080 and then hello world var 1.0.0. Yeah, so this is the web page which we were creating. Welcome, we are learning DevOps, and this is what I had created. It's a simple web application. You can change the contents of this particular web page when you are working on this. Okay, that's it as part of this particular hands-on exercise. I hope you are also able to complete this exercise. I'll keep coming back with more useful videos. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you. Bye.